Back in the reception room, Lois met a half-dozen more of Keith's particular friends. There was a young man named Jarvis, rather pale and delicate-looking, who, she knew, must be a grandson of old Miss Jarvis at home, and she mentally compared this aesthetic with a brace of his riotous uncles. There was Reagan, with a scarred face and piercing intent eyes that followed her about the room and often rested on Keith with something very like worship. She knew then what Keith meant about a good man to have with you in a fight. He's the missionary type, she thought vaguely. China or something. I want Keith's sister to show us what the shimmy is, demanded one young man with a broad grin. Lois laughed. I'm afraid the father rector would send me shimmying out the gate. Besides, I'm not an expert. I'm sure it wouldn't be best for Jimmy's soul anyways, said Keith solemnly. He's inclined to brood about things like shimmies. They were just starting to do the maxi, wasn't it, Jimmy, when he became a monk, and it haunted him his whole first year. You'd see him when he was peeling potatoes, putting his arm around the bucket and making irreligious motions with his feet. There was a general laugh, in which Lois joined. An old lady who comes here to Mass sent Keith this ice cream, whispered Jarvis under the cover of the laugh, because she heard you were coming. It's pretty good, isn't it? There were tears trembling in Lois's eyes. 4. Then, half an hour later, over in the chapel, things suddenly went all wrong. It was several years since Lois had been at Bndctn, and at first she was thrilled by the gleaming monstrance which its central spot of white, the air rich and heavy with incense, and the sun shining through the stained-glass windows of St. Francis Xavier overhead, and falling in warm red tracery on the cassock of the man in front of her. But at the first notes of O Salutaris Hosta, a heavy weight seemed to descend upon her soul. Keith was on her right, and young Jarvis on her left, and she stole an uneasy glance at both of them. What's the matter with me? She thought impatiently. She looked again. Was there a certain coldness in both their profiles that she had not noticed before? A pallor about the mouth, and a curious set expression in their eyes. She shivered slightly. They were like dead men. She felt her soul recede suddenly from Keith's. This was her brother, this unnatural person. She caught herself in the act of a little laugh. What's the matter with me? She passed her hand over her eyes, and the weight increased. The incense sickened her, and a stray, ragged note from one of the tenors in the choir grated on her ear like the shriek of a slate pencil. She fidgeted and raised her hand to her hair, touched her forehead, and found moisture on it. It's hot in here, hot as the deuce. Again she repressed a faint laugh, and then, in an instant, the weight on her heart suddenly diffused into cold fear. It was that candle on the altar. It was all wrong. Why didn't someone see it? There was something in it. There was something coming out of it, taking form and shape above it. She tried to fight down her rising panic, told herself it was the wick. If the wick wasn't straight, the candles did something. But they didn't do this. With incalculable rapidity, a force was gathering within her, a tremendous assimilative force, drawing from every sense, every corner of her brain, and as it surged up inside her, she felt an enormous, terrified repulsion. She drew her arms in close to her sides, away from Keith and Jarvis. Something in that candle. She was leaning forward. In another moment she felt that she would go forward towards it. Didn't anyone see it? Anyone? Ugh! She felt a space beside her, and something told her that Jarvis had gasped and sat down very suddenly. Then she was kneeling, and as the flaming monstrance slowly left the altar in the hands of the priest, she heard a great rushing noise in her ears. The crash of the bells was like hammer blows, and then, in a moment that seemed eternal, a great torrent rolled over her heart. There was a shouting there, and a lashing as of waves. She was calling, felt herself calling for Keith, her lips mouthing the words that would not come. Keith! Oh my God! Keith! Suddenly she became aware of a new presence, something external, in front of her, consummate and expressing in warm red tracery. Then she knew. It was the widow of St. Francis Xavier, Her mind gripped at it, clung to it, finally, and she felt herself calling again, endlessly, impotently, "Keith! Keith!" Then, out of a great stillness, came a voice. "Blessed be God." With a gradual rumbling sound, the response rolling heavily through the chapel, "Blessed be God." The words sang instantly in her heart. The incense laid mystically and sweetly peaceful upon the air, and the candle on the altar went out. Blessed be his holy name. Blessed be his holy name. Everything blurred into a swinging mist. With the sound half gasp, half cry, she rocked on her feet and reeled backwards into Keith's suddenly outstretched arms.